I took the job because it was the only one that didn't require me to talk to anyone. That's the honest reason. There were other reasons I gave people. That I needed the hours. That nights paid $1.40 more. That I wanted the quiet so I could finally read again. But the real one was that the posting said overnight facility monitor, and underneath that, in the same plain font, no customer-facing duties. I read that line 4 times in the parking lot of a gas station on Route 9, and then I called the number. My mother had died in March. By October, one had sold her house, or rather I had let a woman named Priscilla sell it while I signed things she put in front of me, and I had put everything I couldn't throw away into a 10 by 15 unit at a facility 2 counties over, and I had not gone back. I was still paying for it. $41 a month, automatic withdrawal, the 3rd of the month. I want to be clear that I understood the irony of what I did next. I understood it the whole time. It just didn't feel like enough of a reason not to. The facility was statewide self-storage, Facility 1014. If you've driven Route 9 past Corliss, you've seen it and forgotten it in the same second. A long tan wall, a sign with the letters slightly out of level, a chain-link gate with a keypad on a post. 4 buildings. A and B are the drive-up kind, the ones with the orange roll doors you see in movies about people who've lost everything. C and D are interior. Climate-controlled, which means a thermostat set to 55 and 2 dehumidifiers that run in the ceiling, and a smell I still can't describe properly. Cold concrete is part of it. Cardboard. Something floral and industrial, from the plug-in air fresheners the corporate office ships in bulk, always the same scent, something they call linen. Dale Prosser hired me over the phone in about 9 minutes. He asked if I had a felony, if I could stay awake, and if I'd ever done any kind of security work. I said no, yes, and no. He said that was fine, that the job wasn't security, that the job was monitoring, and that there was a difference he'd explain when I came in. The difference, it turned out, was that I wasn't allowed to stop anything. If someone was breaking into a unit, I called the sheriff and I stayed in the office. If a tenant was inside past hours, I noted it and I stayed in the office. If the building was on fire, I called it in and I got out, and I did not attempt to retrieve anything, ever, for any tenant, for any reason. Dale said this last part with a specificity that suggested somebody had once tried. "You're a witness," he said. "That's the whole job. You watch and you write it down." I liked that. I've thought about it since. How much I liked being told that my job was to notice things and have no obligation to act on them. Here's what a shift was. I came in at 10. Renata, the day clerk, would already be gone, and Dale would be gone, and the office would smell like the microwave. I'd log into the workstation, which ran a rental management program called Storeline that had been designed sometime around 2004 and never meaningfully changed. I'd pull the day's activity. Move-ins, move-outs, delinquencies, gate log. Then I'd bring up the camera wall. 22 cameras, 4 monitors, each one cycling through a quad every 8 seconds, which meant that at any given moment I was seeing 16 of the 22 and missing 6, and the 6 rotated. You get used to that. You start to hold the whole property in your head as a kind of loop, and when something's out of place you feel it a half second before you see it, the way you notice a chair's been moved in a room you know. 3 walkthroughs a night. 11, 1:30, 4. Flashlight, keys, and a paper binder. The binder is the part people don't believe. In 2019, every facility in the chain went digital. You enter your walkthrough in Storeline, time-stamped, done. But 114 also keeps a paper log and has since the 80s, because of some clause in an old insurance policy nobody's ever paid a lawyer enough to read. So you write it twice. You write it in the computer, and then you write it by hand in a green 3-ring binder with a pen chained to the desk. 23 Tau. 4. BLDGA exterior all secure. B all secure. C corridor clear, temp 55. D corridor clear, temp 55. Gate closed. No incidents. 8 hours, 3 entries, 5 minutes of actual writing. That was the job. The rest was sitting. I want to give you a fair sense of how boring it was, because otherwise none of the rest of it will land the way it should. There was a vending machine in the office vestibule that only took bills and only took them if you fed them in slowly, holding your breath. There was a space heater under the desk because corporate keeps the office at the same 55 as the units. There was a raccoon that lived under the pallet stack behind B and came out around 2, and I named her, and I'm not going to tell you what I named her because it's embarrassing. There were tenants who came at odd hours because 114 cells 24-hour access is a premium and about 30 people a month pay for it. A man in his 50s who came Tuesdays at midnight and sat in his open unit in a lawn chair with the door up, doing nothing, for about an hour. A woman going through a divorce who came at 3 in the morning twice and cried in her car in the lot, and both times I watched her on camera for and did not go out, because that was the job. It was, for about 11 weeks, the best job I've ever had. The first thing was a blank field on a spreadsheet. Part of the 10 o'clock routine was pulling what Storeline calls the occupancy snapshot, a list of every unit at the facility, its size, its status, and its tenant. 406 units. You're supposed to scan it for anything flagged, then archive it. I don't think anyone read it. I read it because I'd finished my book. Building C, interior, units 30 through 45. Odd numbers on the left wall, even on the right, the way houses are numbered on a street. And going down the list, they all read the same way: unit number, size, then either a tenant name and an account number, or the word vacant in small caps, except 37. Unit 37, 5x10, and then nothing. Not vacant. Not a name. The 2 cells were empty. Not a space, not a dash. I clicked into them and the cursor sat at position 1 with nothing behind it. I assumed it was a data error. Everything about Storeline suggested a data error was the most likely explanation for anything. I made a note of it in the binder because that's what a witness does, and I moved on. At the 1:30 walkthrough, I went and looked at it, because why wouldn't you? C corridor is about 110 feet long, concrete floor sealed with something that's worn to a shine down the middle, fluorescent fixtures every 12 feet with the kind of ballast hum that you stop hearing after 4 minutes, and then hear enormously when it stops. 16 orange doors. Cold enough that if you stand still, your fingers go dumb. Unit 37 had a lock on it. That was the second thing, and at the time it registered as nothing at all. The facility puts a green tag disc lock on every vacant unit. Bright green plastic tag, part number stamped on it, so that from 30 feet down a corridor you can see at a glance which units are empty and which aren't. It's the single most useful thing about the entire operation. 37 had a brass padlock. An old one, the body worn down to a soft yellow-brown at the corners the way brass goes when hands have been on it for decades. No tag. And the hasp it hung from wasn't the standard cylinder guard the rest of the building had. It was a plain steel loop, welded, painted over so many times the paint had gone rounded and thick. So, not vacant. Somebody's unit. And the system had eaten the record. That's what I wrote. C37 shows blank in snapshot. Tenant lock present. Flag for DP, I underlined the DP so Dale would see it. He didn't write back. I asked him about it a week later when our shifts overlapped by 10 minutes. He was putting on his coat. He said, 37's, not in the rotation. I said, meaning it's not rentable? He said, meaning it's not in the rotation. And then he said something about the gate motor sticking in the cold, and then he left. I want to be fair to Dale Prosser. I've turned that exchange over a lot since, and every time I go looking for something in his face, a flicker, an evasion. I can't find it. He wasn't hiding anything. He said it the way you'd say a hallway isn't a room. He wasn't refusing the question. As far as I can tell, he didn't hear one. For a while, it was just a thing I looked at. I'd get to see on the 130, and I'd slow down a little going past 37, the way you do at a house where something happened. Nothing was wrong with it. It was a door. The dust was the third thing, and the dust is where it stopped being nothing. The corridors get swept Tuesday mornings with a wide push broom and a treated dust mop, and by Friday there's a fine grit along the base of the walls where the air handlers push it. Uniform. You see it every night, and you don't see it. The Thursday before Thanksgiving, I noticed that in front of 37 the grit line was interrupted. There was a clean arc on the floor, starting at the left edge of the door and sweeping right, maybe 1.5 feet at its widest, tapering to nothing at both ends. The exact shape a door leaves when it swings. Roll doors don't swing. That's the whole point of a roll door. It goes up. And the arc wasn't the shape of anything I could produce by dragging a broom. Either I tried, later, on a different section of corridor, and a broom leaves parallel strokes and a fan at the end, not a clean crescent with a defined outer edge. I decided a tenant had set something down and pivoted it. A dolly, a chest of drawers, a mini fridge. That's completely reasonable. People move furniture in storage facilities. It is, in fact, the only thing they do there. I photographed it with my phone and I wrote it in the binder, and I went home at 6 and slept until 2 in the afternoon with the blackout curtain clipped shut, which is how I slept all that autumn. The following Thursday, the arc was there again. Wider, maybe 2.5 feet. The Thursday after that, I got to see at 1:34 and stood at the mouth of the corridor with the flashlight off, because the fixtures are on all night and you don't need it. And I looked down 110 feet of orange doors and I could see the pale crescent on the floor from where I stood. The gate log for those 3 nights showed no entries after 9:40 p.m. Nobody had been in the building. And the arcs were on Thursdays, which meant they'd formed sometime after Tuesday's sweep, which is a window of 2 days, which proves nothing. I know it proves nothing. I've had a long time to think about what it proves. Here's where I started doing more than I was asked to, and I'd like to say it was courage, but it was mostly that I was 36 and alone and awake at 3 in the morning. The DVR at 1014 keeps 30 days rolling. You can scrub it from the workstation. Camera 12 covers C corridor, mounted at the north end, looking straight down the run so that all 16 doors are in frame in a long diminishing perspective. It's a good camera, not a great one. The image gets grainy under the fluorescence and the compression makes the far end swim, but it's pointed at exactly the right thing. I pulled the previous Thursday 8:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m. and I watched it at 4 times speed, which is 10 hours and 2.5. Nothing happened. I want to be precise about that because it matters. Nothing happened. No shadow, no figure, no door opening. The corridor sat there and the timestamp ran, and at 1:34 I walked into frame from the north end, small, and got bigger, and stood in front of 37 for a while, and went out again. But when I was scrubbing back to find myself, I passed something at 12:51 and had to go back. The timestamp at the bottom of the frame read 00.51.14, and then the next frame read 00.52.44. 90 seconds. The image didn't change. That was the thing. There was no cut, no black frame, no stutter, no shift in the grain. The corridor at 00.51.14 and the corridor at 00.52.44 were the same corridor, lit the same way, dust in the same places. If you weren't reading the numbers, you'd swear you were watching continuous footage. It was only the counter that jumped. I found the same jump on the 2 Thursdays before. And then, because I'd started, I found it on the Wednesday and the Tuesday and the Monday and every single night in the retained 30 days, on camera 12, and only on camera 12. Always 90 seconds. Never at the same clock time. 12:51, 2, tot 7, 11:38, 3, tot 19. No pattern I could find, and I looked for one. I put them all in a spreadsheet and sorted them and subtracted them from each other and got nothing. That's a hardware fault. That's what that is. Old drive, failing sector, a channel dropping frames, and the encoder papering over the gap. I've since been told by 2 different people who do this professionally that this is not really how it works, but at the time it was an enormous relief and I held on to it. I called the vendor. Their support line is in Ohio, and the man I got was patient with me in a way I didn't deserve at 4 in the morning. He asked me to pull the system event log. Every gap, every dropped frame, every channel loss, Every reboot writes an event. It's the first thing they look at. The log went back 18 months. It had 4 entries in it, all power failures, all matching storms I could remember. He said, "There's no gaps on your system." I said the timestamps skip. He said, "There's no gaps on your system." Again, not unkindly. "And then you can send me a clip if you want." I sent him a clip. He emailed me back the next afternoon while I was asleep. The email said, "Watched it twice. Counters continuous. Are you looking at channel 12? I opened the same file on my laptop at home, sitting on the floor with my back against the couch and a bowl of cereal I didn't eat. The counter was continuous. 00.51.14, 00.51.15, 00.51. Dot 16 all the way through to 00.52.44, without a break, 90 seconds of an empty cold corridor and 16 orange doors, exactly as long as it should be. I still have that file. I've watched it maybe 40 times. It's 90 seconds of nothing, and it's all there. And the first time I watched it, it wasn't. I'd like to talk about Miriam now. She came in on a Sunday in early December at 11:06 p.m., which I know because the gate log knows. I was in the office and the buzzer went and camera 1 showed a small sedan, an older Camry, silver, stopped at the keypad. She had trouble with the code. People do. The keypad's angled wrong, and in the winter your hands don't work. And after the 3rd try, the system locks you out for 2 minutes, and she sat there through it, and then she got it on the 4th. 20 minutes later, she knocked on the office door. I want to be honest that I was annoyed. No customer-facing duties. But you don't ignore a knock at 11:30 at night. She was maybe 70. Wool coat, the good kind, worn at the cuffs. Hair set. She had that particular self-possession of a woman who has been the most competent person in every room she's been in for 50 years and is tired of it. She asked whether the corridor lights in C were on a timer because she thought they used to be brighter. I said they weren't on a timer. I said we'd replaced some ballasts in the fall. She said, "It's colder than it was too." I said the thermostat was set to 55, same as D. She said, "They used to run it colder." We stood there. Outside the vestibule, the vending machine cycled its compressor. I asked her, because I'd been holding it for 6 weeks and she was the first person who'd ever said anything to me about that building, whether she knew anything about 37. She didn't react the way people react in stories. She thought about it the way you think about a question at the DMV. She said, 37 was the office. I said, "The office is out front." She said, "Before, when there was just the one building." She adjusted her purse strap. You'd come in and there was a counter and a man with a book. It was warmer then, obviously, they had a heater in there. And then, in exactly the same tone, the tone of a person providing an unremarkable civic fact. They didn't move it, they built around it. I asked her when that was, and she said she'd started renting in 87 or 88, and it was already the way it is now by then. Then she said goodnight and thanked me for the lights, which I hadn't done anything about, and she went out, and the Camry went out the gate at 11:52 p.m. I checked the gate log at midnight. Her code came back to account 5,541, which had closed out in April of 2019. The unit it belonged to, D12, had been rented 3 times since. I searched Storeline for every tenant, current or former, with the first name Miriam. There were 2. One was a woman who'd rented in 2013 and was, according to a note in her file, deceased. The other was 31 years old and lived in the next town over and had a unit in building a... I searched the archived move-in agreements. I searched the scanned lien notices. I searched the auction records, which go back to 2006 and which I had no business being in. Nothing. And here's the part I keep coming back to, the part I'd put in front of a doctor if a doctor would take it seriously. I remember her perfectly. I remember the wear on her cuffs. I remember that her left glove was in her pocket and her right one was on. I remember that she said obviously about the heater and the small dry way she said it, like the past was a place she was slightly impatient with. The camera has her. She's on camera 1 at the keypad and camera 3 crossing the lot and camera 9 at the vestibule door. She's real. She's on the drive. She just isn't in the record. There's a drawer in the office, bottom left, that Dale calls the graveyard. It's where paper goes to be technically retained. Expired W-9s, a manual for a floor buffer nobody's seen in a decade, a rubber-banded stack of business cards from a locksmith who died, and old binders. Green 3-ring, same as mine, going back further than I expected. I pulled 2009 out of there on a slow Wednesday because I wanted to know if the 90-second thing was older than the DVR. It's the same log. Same 3 walks a night. Same abbreviations. Same dead phrasing. BLDGAX'd all secure. Gate closed. No incidents. Some nights a note about a tenant, a light out, a dog barking in a car. There's a stretch in June where somebody has drawn a small dog in the margin 4 times on 4 different nights. Badly. And running through it, maybe once a week, sometimes twice, sometimes not for a month. A line that isn't like the other lines. Secor. 37 open. Closed it. That's all. No elaboration. No incident report. Not once in 11 months does anyone write 37 open and then write anything else about it. Ever. Every entry in that binder was signed with initials in the right margin. WM. Those are my initials. I sat with that for a long time. The office at 3 a.m, the space heater ticking, 22 cameras cycling behind me. And I remember making the decision that there had been a man in 2009 with my initials who worked nights at a storage facility in a town I hadn't lived in yet, and that this was a coincidence, and that coincidences are the most common thing in the world and only feel rare because we don't notice the millions of times they don't happen. I asked Dale. I said, "Who was on nights before Marcus?" He said, "Marcus. And before Marcus, a guy named Ted for about 6 weeks. And before Ted, we didn't have anybody on nights. Corporate only funded the position in 17. I said the binders go back to 09. He said, "Sure. Renata does the closing walk on days and writes it up for the night, or she used to. It's a formality." He was doing something with a box cutter and a shipping envelope. "Why?" I said no reason. I went home. I looked at my own binder the next night, the current one, the one with my handwriting in it, and I read every entry I'd made since October 40-some nights, and I found 4 I did not remember writing. They weren't strange entries. That's what I need you to understand. 3 of them were completely ordinary, 01-31, see car clear, temp 55, and they were on nights I'd worked, in my hand, in my pen, with nothing wrong with them except that when I looked at them nothing came back. No memory attached. A blank where a night should be. The 4th one was on November 30th at 01-29. See car, 37 open. Closed it. I started doing things that I would describe now as unwell. I photographed the corridor at the start and end of every shift, from the same spot, standing with my heels against the threshold strip so the framing would match. I have about 200 of those photos. They are identical. I've compared them in a program that highlights differences between 2 images and gotten nothing but the dust and my own shaking. I counted doors. 16. Always 16. I counted them out loud, and then I felt stupid. And then I kept doing it. I stopped sleeping properly, which sounds like the sort of thing you say in a story like this, so let me be concrete. I would get home at 6:20, sleep until 11, wake up completely, lie there until 3, sleep again until 6:30, and go back in. I lost about 11 pounds without trying. I was drinking 4 or 5 cups of coffee a night out of a machine that made it taste like the inside of a thermos. And in the 2nd week of December, I took the tape measure out of the auction kit. The auction kit is a plastic tote with the things you need when a unit goes to Leon. Bolt cutters, a clipboard, a digital camera nobody's used since phones got good, inventory sheets, and a 25-foot Stanley tape. Units 35 and 39 flank 37 on the left wall of C. Both were vacant. Both had green tags. I have keys to the facility locks. That's not a violation. That's the job. You open vacant units to check for water intrusion. 35 is a 5 by 10. I measured it. 10 feet, 1 inch from the door track to the back wall. Sheet metal partition walls, corrugated, standard. 39 is a 5 by 10, 10 feet, 1/2 inch. Then I went outside, into the cold, and walked around to the back of building C where the pavement gives out into gravel and a strip of weeds along the property fence. And I measured from the outside face of the exterior wall to the outside face of the corridor side wall, which I could do because there's a break in the wall at the utility chase, and I could see the corridor's block from there. I did it twice and got within an inch both times, 11 feet, 4 inches, which accounts for 10 feet of unit, a partition block in the finish. So the wall is deep enough for a 10-foot unit. 35 is 10 feet. 39 is 10 feet. And 37 is between them. I put the tape against 37 door at the base and ran it up. The door is the same width as the others. 4 feet, 11. Same track, same handle. Then I lay down on the concrete floor of C corridor at 2 in the morning, which is 55 degrees and takes the heat out of you fast, and I put the end of the tape under the rubber weather seal at the bottom of the door and pushed it in. 14 inches. It hit something flat and gave a little the way a tape does when it buckles, so I pulled it back and did it again slower at the left side and got 14 1/4. And again at the right side. 14 inches in an 11-foot-4 wall with 10-foot units on either side. I lay there on the floor with my cheek near the concrete and the ballast humming, and I thought, very clearly, there is a space in this wall that is 9 feet deep and it is not on the floor plan and it does not have a door. And then I thought, and this is the part I've never said to anyone, where the space is fine and the door is only 14 inches deep, and the wall behind it isn't a wall, and I'm measuring the wrong thing entirely. I put the tape back in the tote. I washed my hands for a long time. I opened it on the 19th of December. I've been asked why by the one person I've told any of this to, and the answer isn't dramatic. It wasn't a decision. I've been circling it since November, and I finally just did it. The way you finally just make a phone call you've been avoiding for a month. I took the bolt cutters from the auction kit at 3:10 a.m. I walked to see. I remember that I was calm, and I remember noticing that I was calm and finding it slightly alarming. The brass padlock wasn't there. The hasp was hanging open. The old welded loop with its rounded paint, and the door was down but the latch was disengaged, and there was a gap of maybe 1.5 inches at the bottom where it hadn't seated. Cold was coming out of it. Not 55, something under that. You could feel it on your shins. I set the bolt cutters down. I got my fingers under the handle. Roll doors are counterweighted, and this one went up as easy as any of them. That long metallic rattle that you hear across the whole building, and it went up and stopped at the top the way they do, and I stood there. It was 14 inches deep. The back wall was painted concrete block, the same as the exterior wall of the building, painted a green that hadn't been made since about 1970, that flat institutional green they used in schools. There was a black rubber base molding along the bottom of it. The floor was the same sealed concrete as the corridor, except right at the threshold where it had been worn smooth in a shallow curve, an arc, worn down maybe 1/8 of an inch, the way a doorstep gets when it's been stepped on for 50 years. 14 inches, and a threshold worn smooth by traffic. There was one thing in it. It was on the floor at the left, standing on its spine against the block. A green 3-ring binder. I took it out. I closed the door. I remember closing the door, and I remember that the latch caught with a sound like a stapler. And I remember standing there for a while with the binder against my chest, and I remember that I turned to go and the brass padlock was on the hasp, and I don't remember hearing it, and I don't remember the hasp swinging shut. I went back to the office. I sat down. I opened the binder under the desk lamp. It's a facility log. It's the same log. Same green binder, same 3-hole paper, same columns, and on the spine, on a strip of masking tape, someone had written in ballpoint, 114 W. Marsh. That's my name! The entries are in my handwriting. My handwriting has a thing it does with the number 4. I don't close the top, so it looks a bit like a lowercase y. And that's there, on every page, hundreds of times. The first entry is dated the 2nd of January. That was 2 weeks after the night I'm describing. I turned pages. It runs a full year. January to December. 3 entries a night, in my hand, in the same abbreviations I use. BLDGAXed all secure. B all secure. C car clear, temp 55. Gate closed. No incidents. Nights and nights and nights of nothing, 400 pages of a man watching an empty building, and threaded through it, maybe once a week, sometimes twice, sometimes not for a month. C car. 37 open. Closed it. I want to tell you that I found something in there about myself. A warning, a message, a date circled. There isn't one. It's just the log. It's the most boring document I have ever held. That's what I can't get past. That whatever this is didn't want to frighten me, it wanted the paperwork done. The last entry in the binder is December 19th. The following January, a full year on. 03.41. C car. 37 open. Closed it. I looked up at the clock on the workstation. It said 3.41. I finished the shift. I want that on the record, because I don't know what it says about me. I did the 4 o'clock walk. I wrote it in the binder, and I entered it in Storeline, and at 6:04 Renata came in and said it was supposed to snow, and I said I hadn't heard, and I drove home. I didn't go back. I emailed Dale that afternoon and said I was resigning effective immediately for family reasons, which is the kind of thing nobody questions. He wrote back 4 words. Understood. Drop the keys. I dropped the keys through the mail slot on a Sunday when I knew the office was closed. That was a little over 2 years ago. Some things I've checked since, because I couldn't not. I never got a W-2 from statewide for that year. I called the corporate payroll line twice. The first time I got a woman who couldn't find me and said the facility number might be wrong. The second time I got a man who found the facility fine and told me that in the period I named, Facility 114 had no employees on the night classification. That the position had been unfunded since 2021, and did I maybe mean a different location. I have the pay stubs. 11 weeks of them, in a folder, direct deposits that show up in my bank statements. I've looked at them enough that the paper's gone soft. I drove out on Route 9 last spring. I didn't go in. I sat in a lot outside the fence with the engine running and looked at the tan wall of Building C, which has no windows. And I thought about how the whole business of storage is that you put something somewhere so that it can stop being your problem without ceasing to exist, and how everybody agrees to that and pays for it month after month and never opens the door. I still pay $41 on the 3rd of the month for a 10 by 15 2 counties, over with my mother's things in it. I have not opened it. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what that means. I work nights at a hospital now. Not clinical. Nothing like that. I monitor the parking structures. 6 levels, 31 cameras, and a paper log, because hospitals are exactly as bad about paper as storage companies are. On level 4 in the northeast corner, there's a space that's been coned off since before I started. Orange cones and a length of chain, and the number on the pillar is 37. I asked about it in my first week, and the guy training me said facilities had it flagged for a drain issue. I asked facilities. They said it wasn't theirs and to ask security. I stopped asking because I could hear how I sounded. I've been there 14 months. 3 weeks ago, I was reading back through my own log. I do that now, every shift. I read the last 2 weeks before I write anything, and I check it against what I remember. And on a Tuesday in June, at 2:14 in the morning, in my handwriting, in my pen, there's a line I have no memory of writing. L4 knee, open, closed it. I've thought about what to do with that. There isn't anything to do with it. It's a log. It's accurate. Somebody has to keep the record. I just wish I knew who I'm keeping it for.